Hi folks, it's James here. Hope you're all keeping well, and just back for another video. Thought I would do a little theme, see if anybody wants to jump on it. Gimme 10 hard rock or classic rock records 1970 through to 1980 inclusive. I've been listening to a bit of this kind of stuff lately, so that idea popped into my head. So I've got 10 albums starting in 1970 going through to 1980, one for each year. And I've got some stats for you, which I've written down in my book here. Let's see if I can find them. I've written it in really small, tiny little writing, which I now can't read, so that's probably not very clever, but let's see how we go. So, starting in 1970, we have the first album by Black Sabbath. There we go. Suitably scary picture on the cover. Classic gatefold. And this came out on the 13th of February 1970. It did go gold eventually, but I was reading about it. It got really terrible press at the time. It was completely slagged off by the British press and by the American press as well. It was seen as being derivative and just schlocky. I think Lester Bangs, who's a very respected critic, he didn't like it at all, and there was various other dissenting voices. Of course, now it's kind of viewed as an absolute pivotal classic album. The invention of heavy metal and everything. It's an interesting record. You can hear how Tony Iommi, the whole band is kind of rooted in British blues. It's quite interesting, but Tony Iommi found a way of making the blues scale and the blues tone just sound really kind of dead-eyed and almost like a kind of zombie version of the blues. It was really blank. It wasn't expressionless, but it was kind of, I don't know, he stripped away a lot of that classic kind of bluesy sound away from the music and turned it into something scary. Quite interesting. Anyway, right, so 1971, 8th of November 1971. Now this album went 6 times platinum in the UK, 23 times platinum in the US, and it sold 37 million copies, and it is the 4th Led Zeppelin album. Led Zepp 4, with the strange old guy on the cover with the sticks on his back. You all know this record. This is the one that has Stairway to Heaven on it, and When the Levee Breaks. Just a monumental rock album. Recorded at Headley Grange in 1971, this big old crumbling haunted mansion that was infested with rats, and John Bonham had his drums set up in the stairwell, and they recorded it on the Rolling Stones' mobile studio unit thing, and just got this absolutely kind of enormous acoustic kind of sound, really vibey, really just, I don't think anybody had quite heard anything like it before. It was just a really groundbreaking album. So anyway, that was 1971. So moving to 1972, came out in June of 1972. This is the band's 5th album, got to number 2 on the US Billboard, and I listened to this just this morning, and it is School's Out by Alice Cooper, with the classic desk cover. We'll look and see if we can just need to take the record out. It's quite a fiddly cover, this. It's a great cover, but it's really fiddly. Whenever you try and sort of do anything with it's just really messy. So you've got the picture in there, you've got the knife and the comic book. I like the fact that the track listing, it's all out of order, but it's done as a School's Out quiz. It says fill in the blanks, and then there's a list of songs, and you have to write down what song, at what side that song is on, and what number song on the side. Brilliant. Produced by Bob Ezrin. It's just a really clever album, really conceptual. It takes in elements of rock and jazz and a bit of R&B, and it's got real kind of just a sort of swaggery attitude, but it's quite sort of postmodern. I'm not a fan of Frank Zappa, but there's a sort of Zappa-y touch to this record, which makes it just really interesting. It's almost like a sort of meta rock album in a way. I might save that discussion for another day. But anyway, there's that one. So we now move on to 1973. This album came out on the 13th of July, got to number 47 in the UK and only number 83 in the US, but the band were destined to be absolutely enormous, and it is my very, very battered original copy of the first Queen album with a classic collage on the back. This album was recorded in downtime, I think. Another band had the studio. It was recorded at Trident. It might have been What the Hoople. I can't quite remember, but Queen was sort of going in after hours and recording this record, and they kind of knocked it together, and it was, Queen became very eclectic quite soon after this, but they did start out as a kind of heavy rock band with touches of prog, I suppose, touches of Yes and all this. But I mean, Brian May was really influenced by Hendrix, really, and there's a definite heavy rock vibe to this record. Songs like Liar, real heavy kind of grinding riff to that. Son and Daughter is a bit of a kind of proto-metal sound as well. Just really great stuff. On side one, you've got Freddie just starting to show the kind of eccentric thing he was going to do later with songs like My Fairy King, which is a very kind of early version of the sorts of stuff he was going to go and do on Sheer Heart Attack, which in turn was a version of what he was going to go on to do in Night at the Opera. It's quite interesting how you can sort of hear all the roots of Queen just there on the debut. Right, 1974, September the 3rd, and this album got to number 1 in the US pop charts. It was their only album to get to number 1 in the pop charts, and it is BTO, Bachman Turner Overdrive, and their album Not Fragile. Now this is quite a recent purchase for me. I picked this up only 2 or 3 months ago, and I'm still getting to know it. But my first impression of it was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a real sort of meat and potatoes rock album, but I really enjoyed it. It was really heavy. It was kind of like, you could put it on and just, pace around the room to it, I suppose. Not Fragile, Rock Is My Life and This Is My Song, great title. Roll On Down the Highway, Freewheeling, You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. There's nothing ironic about it. It's all big gestures and big kind of noisy guitars, but just really, really enjoyable. That takes us to 1974, September. Okay, 75 now, 21st of February 1975. This is the band's 8th album, and it got to number 1 in the UK, and it is Status Quo and On the Level, with an absolutely classic cover there. This album is pretty standard 1970s, mid-1970s Quo. It's got their great sort of pile-driving anthem, Down Down, which I think it was one of John Peel's favourite songs, because he loved kind of stripped back to the bone kind of rock music, and there's nothing, it's just a real no-nonsense album. It's got the great collage in the middle, great stuff. Just a very, very solid Quo album. Little Lady most of the time. I Saw the Light, it sort of shows their melodic side. Recorded during the winter of 1974 at IBC Studios and Phonogram Studios in London. So there's the Quo and On the Level. So we're in the middle of the decade now. We come to 1976, and I spun this one this morning as well. And shout out to Chris at the Vinyl Orchard, who's a big fan of Rainbow and Deep Purple. So this is the album Rainbow Rising. Now this one came out on the 17th of May 1976. It was their second album. I think Richie Blackmore had dumped most of the musicians who played on the first album and got a new band together. Got to number 1 in the UK, and it's got just one of those great kind of black and white portraits that you used to get in the 1970s of hard rock bands just looking like that, looking mean and moody. There's Cozy Powell there, Ian Gillan, and you've got Richie Blackmore. And this is a pretty monstrous album. Side 2, I think, is the better side. It's just got the 2 songs, Stargazer and A Light in the Black. And really great keyboard work on this record by, what's his name, Tony Carey. I just love that sound when he plays with Richie Blackmore, and you get the two very melodic things coming together, those 2 elements of the guitar, which is extremely virtuosic, extremely classical sounding, and then this great kind of like pioneering 1970s analog keyboard sound, and just tremendous energy and drive and spirit, you know. So yeah, Rainbow Rising, what a classic. Right, so punk has broken big by now, but we're not going to see much sign of it in this particular video. Although, you know, this next one, 1977, the 2nd of September, got to number 4 in the UK, and it got to number 39 in the US. And this is the mighty Thin Lizzy, and the album Bad Reputation, which contains, actually it contains a bit of a pop song. The hit from this, Dancing in the Moonlight, was a big, well, you know, real commercial kind of song, I suppose. But it's got some heavy stuff on it as well, you know, the song Bad Reputation, Soldier of Fortune, and I think this might have been the last record that Brian Robertson played on. I could be mistaken about that, but I've got a feeling he left after this record. Anyway, it's a beast. It's Thin Lizzy. What more do I need to say? Fantastic stuff. Right, so, okay, now, 1978, 5th of May, the band's 4th album got to number 23 in the UK charts, got to number 133 in the US, so they were still quite a way away from breaking big, but within 2 albums they became the biggest band in the world. And this was the 1978 album by AC/DC, Power Age. I know some people call it Powerage. I don't understand that. I mean, to me it's just always been Power Age. And this is just one of those bludgeoning hard rock, very, very raw, you know. It was the album that they made just before they teamed up with Mutt Lange. It was still being produced by the production team of Vander and Young, so it was still a kind of in-family project, and very, very hard album, you know. Gimme a Bullet, Down Payment Blues, fantastic lyric in that. Riff Raff, possibly their most spectacular song, and the great Sin City, Ladders and Snakes, Snakes Give, Ladders Give, Snakes Take, Rich Man, Poor Man, Beggar Man, Thief, Ain't Got a Hope in Hell, That's My Belief. Timeless, classic Akadaka from 1978, that is Power Age. Right, we're almost there. 1979, the 30th of November, their 11th album. Only got to number 3 in the UK, I was surprised by that. Got to number 1 in the US, and this is The Wall by Pink Floyd. Not a group that everybody would agree was a heavy rock band, and I would say that they were not really, but this is probably the only record where they dallied with a heavy rock sound. I mean, it was partly pastiche, you know. I mean, the opening song, In the Flesh, it's meant to be a kind of a parodic version, I suppose, of a heavy rock stadium band. But there's lots of quite heavy music on this. Heavy in all senses of the word, you know, heavy in the sense of having a heavy guitar sound. So you get tracks like Run Like Hell and, you know, quite a lot of grungy stuff. But it's also very heavy, you know, it's heavy psychologically. The lyrics are heavy, the concept is heavy. I'd say it definitely falls into the bracket, broadly speaking, of kind of heavy rock, certainly classic rock. And you know, it was the album which started to properly see the splintering of Pink Floyd. Really, they were all falling out with each other, and you know, Rick Wright was kicked out of the band, and all sorts of stuff. An absolutely mad, a mad time for the band, really. And that was 1979. So finally, 1980. 14th of April, the band's 6th album got to number 4 in the UK and got to number 39 in the US. And this is Judas Priest and British Steel. Just a great hard driving rock album, rapid fire, metal gods, breaking the law, grinded, you know, just very kind of balls to the wall stuff, really. I wouldn't describe myself as a big Judas Priest fan. I've got 2 albums. I've got this one and I've got Screaming for Vengeance, and that will kind of do me, really. But yeah, they were a kind of pivotal band, I think, in the whole new wave of British heavy metal kind of movement. And you got Rob Halford there with his leathers and everything. He challenged Freddie Mercury, didn't he, to some kind of thing like, you know, who's the best leather-clad rock frontman or whatever, and Freddie said something like, you know, let's have a contest, but let's also do a contest as to who can do the best ballet dancing, or, you know, or something like that. And that soon shut Rob Halford up, I think. But yeah, anyway, Fantastic stuff. Judas Priest, British Steel, one of the great all-time British rock albums. That takes us to 1980, so that was 1970 to 1980 in hard rock, classic rock, and I'd be interested if anybody wants to try it. Alright, take care folks, see you soon, keep well, bye bye.